This is our Let's Do Biz 2022. Let's talk leadership, entrepreneurship, and technology.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, thank you for your applause. You all have put me in a very tough spot having to go after all of these awesome ladies, but I'm going to try to touch on what everyone has said and how it applies to the cyberspace. So just a little bit of background about me. I'm a lawyer. I'm a government lawyer. I work for the DC Office of Attorney General, and I am what we call in the law a government regulator. That means I sue people on behalf of the government. But it wasn't until this conference that I realized all the people I sue are entrepreneurs. I only sue business runners and business operators and business owners. The section that I'm in the Office of Attorney General has current lawsuits pending against some of the biggest companies in the world. Currently, we are suing Facebook, Google, Amazon. We are also suing certain government entities. I filed a suit against the DC Housing Authority, and we've also sued people for illegal business practices or unfair business practices that operate LLCs, nonprofit groups, nonprofit corporations, and business corporations. In fact, earlier last year, our office filed a suit to forcibly dissolve a business that was operating outside the scope of its initial charter. So I'm here to tell you about what you as business owners, business operators, how to protect yourselves in the cyberspace. And briefly during my presentation, I'm going to start off with cyberbullying and then transition into cyber threats. I'm spending most of my time, my plan to spend most of my time on the cyber threats because I think that'll be more pertinent to the group. But if you all have any questions and I don't know the answers, I'm happy to go back and find the answers and bring them to you. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
What is cyberbullying? So cyberbullying is the process of using the internet, cell phone, or other devices to post or text images intended to hurt or embarrass another person. Now, cyberbullying is really a term of art, and it's meant to apply to children or minors, but kids. It's like, you're in school, you're being cyberbullied. But when that type of activity transitions to adults, it's called cyber harassment. So I don't know if any of you've heard in the news recently, but there is this famous rapper by the name of Cardi B. And Cardi B was the subject of online harassment via YouTube by a YouTuber by the name of Tasha K. Now, the cyberbullying and cyber harassment are criminal issues. They're criminal statutes, and they're regulated by both the federal government and state governments. Florida has an anti-cyberbullying, cyber harassment statute, and it is in the same place in the law as any other type of harassment. So what you can't do in person, you cannot do online. In the same way you can't sit out in front of somebody's house all day and yell threats at them, it's the same way you can't go on a person's page all day for a continued period of time and threaten them or defame them on the internet. And that's true for both children and adults. The age does not matter. So forms of cyberbullying and cyber harassment are called are simply internet trolling. Internet trolling is very much a common practice on the internet, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, places where people can post and YouTube comments, even on like certain comments on the Washington Post, people can troll. But just simple internet trolling about posting negative comments does not arise to the level under the law of cyberbullying or cyber harassment, such to the point that it can be criminally prosecuted. For something to count as harassment under the law, it has to be repeated and there has to be a threat involved that can actually be carried out. So one of the things that affects many women online is revenge porn. Um, Very briefly, what revenge porn is if you send someone or someone takes a nude photo of you and they post it to the internet as a form of revenge or harassment. So a very famous case of revenge porn for a couple of years ago, there was this congresswoman from California, United States congresswoman. She was from the 25th District of California. She was a rising star in the Democratic Party. She was elected to Congress during the Blue Wave in 2018. During the Blue Wave in 2018, and she was basically handpicked by Nancy Pelosi. She was going to be in leadership in the Democratic Party. This woman decided to divorce her husband. He took the naked photos he had of her and sent them to the Daily Mail, and the Daily Mail published them. That is revenge porn. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, and it is illegal. So if any of you are subject to revenge porn or people that you know, please report it to the authorities. This is also another thing that sometimes people think, sharing nudes is innocuous. It is not. Don't post people's nudes without their permission, because that is a part of revenge porn statutes, that you posted something to a naked picture or pornography of someone on the internet without their permission. So there's also internet stalking. Internet stalking is just like internet harassment. It has to be repeated and continuous over time. Now, moving on to cyber threats, which is where I'll spend the bulk of my time. Cyber threats are an ever-shifting landscape. Cyber terrorists, people who are engaged in this type of nefarious activity are changing what they do constantly. So what is pertinent today and what are best practices today might be different a couple of months or even a year from now. So here are the cyber threats I'm going to be covering. First, social engineering. Social engineering are forms of social engineering are called phishing, vishing, and smishing. Now, I know these terms sound weird, but all of us, if you work for the government, if you have a cell phone, you have experienced phishing. If you have an email address, phishing, vishing, and smishing. So briefly, to define social engineering. A social engineering attack is when an attacker uses interaction, social skills to obtain or compromise information about an organization or its computer systems. So, vishing. Vishing is when people essentially, here's the most common form of vishing. It's the Nigerian prince email. So I send you an email saying that I'm someone and I have money for you if you send me money, but to get the money, you have to give me money first. Or sometimes you even get letters through the mail, but specifically we're talking about online. There's typically a quid pro quo involved, and the people are seeking to interact with you to gain some type of personal information. That personal information could be your account information. It could be your social security numbers. Now, and vishing is the same thing, just with voicemails. And smishing is the same thing with text messages. So sometimes on our phones, we get text messages from people we don't know, asking us questions, like particularly saying, oh, your account was compromised. Click this link. And then when you click the link, it asks you for your account information. All of that is forms of social engineering, where somebody presents something to you, asks you to submit, personal information to protect yourself. One of the best ways to protect yourself against social engineering, what I tell my mom is, if you don't know them, they don't know you. So if you get a text from somebody you don't know, if you get an email from somebody you know, first of all, I know it is very difficult, but if you don't know a person, don't open their emails, and especially don't click any links. For those of us who remember the entire Hillary Clinton Trump election, the DNC was raided because somebody just sent an email and clicked on an email that was from an outside Russian source. It all started with email. Now, in that particular case, the social engineering was more sophisticated because the Russian operatives used email addresses that were very similar to people who worked in the DNC. So the email addresses, like for me, my government email is my first name dot my last name. What they would do is just change a letter in the names. So if you were Green, if your name was, for example, Lisa Green with the E, they'd lob the E off and say lisa.green@dnc.gov or dnc.com and pretend to be that person and use that to gain access to the DNC so that they could raid their files. So I guess the most common thing to talk about is being vigilant with both phishing and smishing and all of it. Now, for business owners, where this becomes very important is that social engineering is sometimes a setup for malware and ransomware. And as business owners, you all have to be vigilant. We all have to be vigilant because it's not just our own personal information, it's the information and the account information of our customers, especially if we are online.
Oh.
So I'm going to talk about ransomware, and this is where I'm going to spend like the majority of my time. So ransomware, to piggyback on what Ms. Baker and Nikki was saying, is just what Nikki talked about in her hostage analogy. Ransomware is basically a high-tech digital hostage situation. People use ransomware to infiltrate the devices and the networks of corporations, and then they basically hold that network or those digital files hostage until the corporations pay them. I'm sure all of you remember this from last year. The Colonial Pipeline supplies 45% of the oil and gas to the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States of America. It was the subject of a ransomware attack. As a part of that ransomware attack, hackers from a group abroad, most likely in Russia, infiltrated the Colonial Pipeline's networks. And in doing so, they encrypted their files so that they could not gain access to them. And as a part of it, the ransom was for $4.4 million. And they said, if you pay us $4.4 million in cryptocurrency, we will give you the encryption key so you can once again have access to your data and go about business as normal. The Colonial Pipeline eventually paid the ransom. And this is very important for business owners. If you have a digital business with a large online footprint and you are collecting personal information from people and collecting social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, a part of that is that you also have to protect your network and your digital files online. So for example, some of you might have heard about Equifax, the data breach. My office actually sued Equifax for the data breach. Now, Equifax did not breach its own data, but what business owners are required to do under the law is that they have to take reasonable steps to protect the data that they do have, the personal information of their customers. So this is kind of like a three-layered system. You have the people who've engaged in the criminal activity, which are the hackers who are infiltrating these systems, whether it's the Colonial Pipeline, whether it's Equifax, or any other type of business. And then you have the business itself that is a victim of that behavior. And then at the bottom rung, you have the customer, who is both in ways a victim of the hacking and a victim of the corporation, because the corporation didn't properly safeguard its data. So from a law enforcement government perspective, the people who did the hacking and the data breach, they are criminally liable for what they've done. But criminal prosecution of those people is typically very difficult because they're usually abroad. They're not all together. They leave digital footprints, but they often are part or in or members of or citizens of countries that are not US friendly that will not allow them to be extradited. Also, they are typically very hard to track down. It might take years to track down people. And also, these types of investigations are run by the FBI, and they don't catch one person at a time, because if they catch one person that's a part of the conspiracy, it tips off the other people in the conspiracy. So these investigations take years. But what doesn't take years is the liability for the corporation. So once the data breach is known, the corporation or the company has an obligation to report the breach to the FBI, and also the FTC for larger corporations comes in to see if there was any wrongdoing and if any consumers were negatively affected. Now, where this gets into, there are big companies where this happens to, like Microsoft, but a lot of these groups who engage in these type of cyber attacks are not going after the bigger companies. And even though the bigger companies have the most money, the bigger companies also have this insurance. People offer insurance for cyber threats. So when you have insurance, what you're less likely to do is pay the ransom. So if a cyber hacker feels like you're not going to pay the ransom, why would I waste my time hacking your company if you're just going to have your insurance carrier cover any of the damage that I do to you, any of the financial damages that you've experienced? So what they've done is they've gone to mid-level companies and started using ransomware against them. First of all, mid-level companies, unlike the JP Morgan Chases, Google, Microsoft, they don't have the infrastructure to properly combat a lot of cyber attacks because they have very few employees. They also aren't going to have enough money on hand to pay the extraordinary premiums that cyber insurance costs. Because of these recent attacks, of course, anybody know with insurance, as soon as you use it, they raise the price on you. So once this became a normal part of like just transacting business, ransomware and ransomware attacks, the insurance market actuarial analysis, it's like the threat goes up, the cost goes up. So a lot of mid-level companies have been experiencing ransomware and cyber attacks. Now, a part of the problem here too is that most companies pay the ransom. So going back to what Nikki said, in a hostage situation 101, the first thing you never do is pay. We don't negotiate with terrorists. But what companies know is that, and what the cyber hackers know, is that it's cheaper to pay the ransom than it is to fix the problem. So there is this Norwegian company called Norsk Hydro. Most people have never heard of it. It's probably maybe somewhere in the top 5 producers of aluminum in the world. And Norsk Hydro was hacked. And the first thing they decided, it operates in 50 countries across the world. One day, I think in the spring of 2019, their company is working remotely. None of their employees could remotely access the company's files. The entire company shut down. And they got a digital ransom note saying, pay us and we'll give you the key to decrypt your software. The CEOs and the leaders of that company said, the first thing we're not going to do is pay your ransom. So they were public about it. They said that, hey, we've been hacked, but we are not going to pay the ransom. Just to get their data back and access to their, to try to decrypt their files so they could get back to normal, and going through the forensic work that needed to be done to get their company back online has cost them close to $71 million. Now, the ransom was probably going to be less than 10% of that. So that's what we're seeing in that type of atmosphere. But for people who run businesses, what's very important is that you have to take reasonable care to not let these types of things you know, it sometimes it's inevitable that this not inevitable, but it is very difficult to protect yourselves from or prevent, but you have to take reasonable steps. North Hydro took reasonable steps, and you know, like Ms. McLean said during the beginning, like their leadership learned. They learned on the job about what to do and how to protect themselves. And because it's an ever evolving space, what was good practices today will probably not be good practices tomorrow. But I think the key to everything is being vigilant. So reporting cyber crimes. Now, there are two different types of cyber crimes. There are like personal cyber crimes between you and another person, and there are business cyber crimes where someone has like infiltrated your network. If your network has been infiltrated, if your business files have been compromised, if you if someone has gotten into your account, stolen your customers' information, the best thing for you to do is contact the FBI. Whatever your local field office is, you should give them a call. There's FBI field office everywhere, but you can also file a report online through the FBI's IC3 system. This image was taken directly from the FBI's website, and they can explain to you how to protect yourself and how to report. Also, local authorities like local police agencies, if they're large enough, like here in DC, the Metropolitan Police Department has an internet crimes division too, so you can report to whoever your local authorities are. But businesses who have been infiltrated by cyber hackers, wherever they are, do have an obligation to report. So one of the first things you want to do is, once you've become aware that your business has been infiltrated in any way, you do want to report it to the FBI. Also, you all might, I didn't know this government agency existed until a few years ago. It's called CISA. CISA is a part, it and Homeland Security are supposed to protect the nation from external hacking threats. CISA works hand in hand with the FBI. The FBI is looking for the people who did it. CISA is looking to stem future threats. So the FBI has a kind of a policing function. CISA has a more of a systems function. So, and they also have online reporting mechanisms to protect against. One of the best things that businesses do to protect themselves against these online threats, it annoys all of us, but you have like the double authentication on your devices, where it tells you, hey, we're going to send you a text message to your phone or send you a series of numbers to your emails to log in. It annoys most of us, but it really is an important step in protecting yourself in the online workspace and your online on businesses. Another thing that is very important is that even as a like mid-level government employee, I have like 2 devices. For those of you who are business owners who have 2 phones, especially if you're going to connect to public Wi-Fi, because a lot of us like the public Wi-Fi when we're out and about, be very careful. You might want to get a VPN to protect yourself if you're going to use public Wi-Fi. But also, if you do have a business, you want to keep your 2 devices separate. So what is on my personal phone, I can't put it on my work phone. Like I can use my work phone to call people, but the files, like my own personal information, like the things that I like my music files or like my pictures or my selfies, shouldn't be on my business device. You want to keep those types of things separate. It will also help you like just organize your business space from your personal space. So unless anybody has any questions, that concludes it for me.
Can you just repeat that last thing you said about keeping things separate?
Oh, sure. So going back to keeping things separate, your business files and your personal files should not live in the same space. And I've seen this too in my own work, just as a lawyer, like a little aside. When you sue people, you get this thing called discovery. And I sue businesses and I discover things about people that they don't want me to know about who they are personally as human beings, because they've mixed their business files and their personal files. So Like if you have, like you can go through people's work emails and they're married and they're talking about setting up dates with their girlfriends. It's just like, why did you put that on here? Like every email you send, every text message you send can be retrieved. So if you don't want people going through, if anything happens to your company, you're audited, God forbid you get sued, whatever it is, always keep your business data, your business phone, your business files separate from your personal files. I can't infiltrate a person's personal files, like their individual things, unless they've mixed the two with their business stuff. So always keep them separate. And back to the VPN, if you have people's personal information, so like I know some of you might be into real estate, you have people's personal financial information, their income, their addresses, their social security numbers. And if you're a realtor and you're keeping like a person's files like that on your cell phone, one thing you do not want to do is try to access public Wi-Fi without some type of VPN to protect you. Because if you're on public Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, people can access your device. And you don't want anybody going into your phone if you have real estate files or people's personal information and getting their social security numbers or any of that kind of stuff. People, like the law says that an individual who's given that information to a business has an expectation that the business will keep that information private.
Yes, Argie, what is a VPN?
So a VPN is, hold on, I forgot what the acronym stands for, but they give it to us at our job. Give me 1 second. You can get it online and you can download them on your phone. Basically what it does is it encrypts your data going, like the data coming in and going out. So everything is encrypted. So people can't access your files or see what you're sending when you are on like public, on public Wi-Fi. It stands for virtual private network. So it basically provides you a shield of protection when you are using public Wi-Fi.
Where's a good place to keep your passwords?
So what I do is I have this, I like Apple. They have their problems, but I like them. What Apple will do for you, and they will also have services that do it for you too, is that they will generate for you these very long and complicated passwords that even you don't remember, so that they are so that they're essentially hack proof. But oh, that's another thing. Never repeat passwords. I know it's so easy and we all want to do it, but I know some of you, I see your faces. You got that same one password for all of your accounts. I see it. I know it. I know it.
Yes, yes.
But don't do it. What you can do is there are services, apps that will generate new passwords for you. Apple has it built into their system, but they'll generate new passwords for you for everything. So for some things, I don't know my passwords. I will have to either log into my Apple account and try to find the password for whatever it is, or if it's something that I know I'm going to use repeatedly, I'll write it down. Now, I want to suggest that if you have like this very difficult password that you've worked so hard to create, to save it in notes on your phone. If somebody accesses your phone, it's like, you know, the person that writes the PIN for the ATM and put it in their wallet, you've defeated the purpose of the PIN. So for things that I know I'm going to keep that are very important to me, like the passwords that I truly need, I will memorize them. My dad had this thing where he memorized his driver's license number. He said, even if I leave the license, I have the number. It's important to me that I memorize it. For like the 3 or 4 passwords that are uber important to you, memorize those or write them down somewhere in your house, but don't store them digitally unless you have a service or the app like Apple does, where it keeps generating new passwords for you every time. So every time you log in, it just populates itself. Yes, I feel the same way. I feel the same way. Because some days I see that public Wi-Fi and I'm like, ooh, I'm lazy. Am I going to roll the dice that somebody's going to access my data?
Wow.
On my work phone, I never access the public Wi-Fi ever. Because for me, for lawyers, business owners, we have an obligation to keep our data and our stuff safe from outside people. So if this is the government's phone, if I can't access the LTE that's on here, that's their fault. They should have given me a better network, but I won't access the public Wi-Fi. I'll just say, oh, you can't talk to me right now. You all should have issued me a better phone. But the VPN on your own device will give you that extra layer of protection if you like the Wi-Fi. And the apps that will, if you have, most of us have the iPhone, Apple will do it for you. There's an app that will just generate the password. Also, like Ms. Bush said, there are ways to generate complicated passwords that are meaningful to you that you always remember. So it's just playing with it. But what happens is that when like the cyber world is moving to a place of what we call zero trust. So they're going to build in systems that are always redundant, because what we do is we go out in the world, in the real world, we see people, we can interact with them. And so there's this idea that we trust when you walk down the street, you trust in the people in the cars not to drive on the sidewalk. We're trusting everybody in this space, but in this digital space, where it's so difficult to put faces with names and know where people are across the world, we can't proceed with that same type of trust. So now what we're going to a space on these phones and this computer and all of this is a place of zero trust, where we just have to ever be vigilant. And guess what? We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to figure it out. And it's going to be an ever-changing landscape as we go forward. Yeah. Especially now that, COVID rocked the world. Many people are not going to go back to an office full time. This is how we're always going to interact. COVID changed the world in so many ways. And I think this Zoom space, like Ms. Bush said, like Nikki said, with leveling up, we're all going to have to level up our internet security and be vigilant, because guess what? People like this. My mom hates it. But businesses love it, because they don't have to pay rent in an office building. Right. Why would I pay a building thousands of dollars a month when you can use and pay for electricity, when right. I can have my employees use their own electricity, their own Wi-Fi, and their own computer, and get the same work output with no rent and no utilities in an office building.
Wow. Wow.
Argatonia, e-wallet on Apple is excellent. You can store that, they generate the password, and you can set it up for facial ID so that your face has to come up before it'll open. Unless you remember, you also have to have a password too, in case the facial ID doesn't work. But that's really good. And you can never remember those passwords. They're very complicated.
Yeah, I made the mistake of putting one of the Apple passwords on my Amazon account. And me and Amazon took a little break because I couldn't remember what it was. And I was just like, okay, how do I find it again? Oh, that reminds me of something. I know a person who did CyberSecurity. That was her full-time job for the federal court system. One thing she talked about was, instead of you putting your debit card numbers and credit card numbers into these apps directly, use PayPal or something similar, or Venmo, because PayPal has the credit card number. You don't want the credit card the same credit card number on all the apps. So if you use PayPal, it's just being paid through PayPal. PayPal has it, but the vendor won't have it. Good. And that was some of the advice that she gave me. So like now when I Lyft, when I Uber, or if I'm ordering food, because it's DC, so out there right now it's like 25 degrees and I'm not going outside, it's the PayPal, so the credit card numbers aren't floating around everywhere. So those are just little things you can do. Amazon also has an Amazon Pay function as well that is very helpful, and that certain vendors use. So like you all aren't, you don't want all your information out there. The Apple browser also has this thing too, where it will tell you if it's seen people stealing your passwords. It will pop up and say, your password has been leaked on the dark
Mm.
web. We suggest that you change it.
No.
And
okay.
and I've gotten that message too. It is nothing that, like, I've gotten phishing emails in my government email, people asking me to submit passwords to certain parts of our network. In my office, we have an IT person. You forward those emails directly to the IT person so that they can warn everybody in the company. But this is something that happens all the time. We're all just learning. That's all we're doing.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, we've gotten so much information today. I'm just still so excited. But Argatonia, there are one or two comments in the chat. One is, what about password managers? Are you familiar with that one?
Yes, I had a friend, she didn't like the Apple, so she used that type of software. Because I'm on Apple, I'm doing the Apple Wallet and just letting the Apple generate the original passwords for me all the time. It's not a space that I'm like cognizant of, because that's what my devices are.
Okay.
But
And somebody,
password managers, those work too.
they were, okay. And somebody, Judy Lane asked, what do you recommend for those with Samsung phones?
Anybody? I haven't used like an Android or a Samsung in so long. Anybody tech savvy on the call who uses those? I can text a buddy of mine and ask her what she uses and report it back to the group.
Okay, that would probably help.